futile at best, actively harmful at worst. I didn't have a solution exactly. This is what we were paid to do. But at least now I could acknowledge why it felt wrong, or at least why my inner voice was screaming at me, like an email marked extremely urgent. I had no idea what to say about the walkout, so I focused on the marketing of it. I clicked through slides of our iconography, the color scheme, screenshots of our tweets, talking about how we tried to keep the messaging consistent, touching on the finer points of the protest's branding. It was, I figured, what Marion wanted to hear, but my delivery was flat. What was I imparting exactly? A playbook for others to use to subvert company hierarchy? Marion couldn't have thought much about what she was asking for. What was the audience supposed to do with this information besides clap politely at the clever cross-purposing of my Google marketing skills? I spoke quickly, unable to tell how any of it was landing with my fellow marketing managers. Several of them were my people, my micro-kitchen commiserators, analyzers of the management, simmering with some level of discontent, living with the big existential questions about our work. Was this really the end game, the holy grail? I had a lot to say to them. In this brief window, the dawn of the tech worker movement, maybe we had a chance to do something good with our lives, something that actually mattered. And to the normies too, the people who didn't have any particular questions or qualms about Google, who didn't know or care about the patriarchy or surveillance capitalism. But under the watchful glare of Marion and the corporation, it didn't feel right. I wrapped it up to polite, detached applause, and I didn't take questions. That's all so cool, Marion said distantly, as if she hadn't heard a word I said. She nudged a deputy, a girl named Victoria, who looked like me, a different model off the factory line, and handled all Marion's events, logistics, and swag orders the way I handled Marion's presentations and ideas. She was a much better soldier, though, all in, no questions, no complaints. Victoria reached under the table and furnished a pair of white Doc Marten boots. We wanted to give you something to commemorate your activism, Marion said. I was speechless. I stared at the boots, befuddled, then down to my naked feet. How the hell had they figured out my shoe size? I guess after 11 years, I should have figured Google would have all my biometric data. I was missing the reference, though, and I found this on the Doc Martens website later. As the ultimate protest footwear, Dr. Martens have played a part in the LGBTQ rights movement for 5 riotous decades, adopted by global queer communities as a symbol for stomping all over the status quo. Well, I wasn't queer, but I got the reference. What a joke. Surely nothing said stomp the patriarchy like $200 boots your boss expensed. My transgressions were still, I guess, corporate sanctioned. The message was nevertheless crystal clear. Let's call the walkout cosplay. Stay nested here in the corporate line. No more stepping out. Could I keep my nose clean? The choice was in my hands. It was hard to admit, but of course, I'd already made it.
What a nightmare. I have so many questions. I'll try to ask some of them in the next, 25 minutes, 30 minutes. I guess my first question would be, you say, in what you just read, you said something like, I had become, I guess, a labor organizer, right? And I was wondering if when your life took that turn, if it came as a surprise to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the whole idea of the book was trying to figure out what exactly happened, because it was sort of like I snapped, I think. And there was a whole group, a kind of underground group of people, Meredith Whittaker and some of these other people that had been organizing, and sort of some of whom had even come to Google with the sort of intent of building this, what was called at the time, the tech won't build it movement. So sort of thinking about how code is being deployed for these sort of government contracts and sort of like nefarious purposes, and thinking about Google and the knowledge economy and all these things. And meanwhile, I was just in my kind of corporate marketing job, sort of alone and simmering with some of these more, shall we say, politically awakened thoughts about, how Google was sort of operating in the world. But I wasn't coming out of this sort of organizing group. We all kind of joined forces in that moment. But I think it was a bit of sort of my pure anger in the moment, which is what both my kind of personal story as well as, kind of what was happening with Me Too and, Google sort of malfeasance at the time. But I don't think that anyone who was like a careful labor organizer would be like, let's organize a walkout in 1 week and, just sort of blow the doors off.
Right. I guess one way to look at this book is kind of as a story of awakening. And it's a story of awakening by parts, right? I mean, you do snap, but it seems like it is kind of like a slow transition over the years in which you are at Google. You arrive there as a kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed young person, believing in the "don't be evil" messaging of the corporation, and little by little, you start to feel that maybe things aren't all they are cracked up to be.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you think that, is it a combination of the corporation in fact becoming worse and worse? Or is it just that you awaken to things that you weren't aware of in the beginning, or both? How would you
Well, I think
portray that?
Clearly, Google became super corporate over time, and I think that was interesting to kind of read about how people have characterized the history of the company. That it became this like massive holdings company of like many different sort of like data sucking corporations throughout. It's like one big thing. But yeah, I mean, I think that the world was pretty enamored with Google when I got there, and I think that I told a story to myself that I was so drawn in and so, all in and jacked up on the sort of like, mission of the search company. But I think looking back on it, it was sort of more than I'm a people pleaser. Yeah. Trying to do a good job in like a communications job. And I don't think that enough is discussed about how being in communications actually requires a quite emotional and psychological process of matching what you say to how you feel. And if there's dissonance, it's like almost impossible to do that job. If you don't really believe so anyway, so I was, listening to the kind of, lords of the universe at Google, and they were pretty convincing, that they were going to go and like solve all humanity's problems. And now we kind of all roll our eyes collectively at, the kind of hubris, of all the Altman and Musk and all these sort of figures are like not popular characters. But when I came to Google, Larry and Sergey were like folk heroes who were like, Ben and Jerry. They were beloved by the American people. And furthermore, as like representatives of American progress. It's sort of like, who am I to question, what these, geniuses are going to do?
Yeah. It's funny because I know you. I knew you at the end of your time. I think we met each other at the end of your time at YouTube.
Yeah, I was a bit more disgruntled then. Yeah.
Right. So I know you as a disgruntled person.
Someone who can talk shit.
Or I definitely know you as a person who has a very kind of like ironic point of view on the kind of status quo, the stories those in power tell us in order to make money off us, I guess. They tell themselves stories in order to, build us or something. Sure. But I'm it's like it's so hard for me to imagine, like when you came in, did you from the beginning have a kind of like inkling of that? Like, did you ever take notes, or were you all in? Like, because you describe it like you have a pretty like close read of your experience at Google from the very beginning. And I'm wondering if it's something that retrospectively you had to go back and be like, okay, I was thinking this, but in fact, this was happening. You described, for instance, this executive telling you not to wear, like you take kind of a scooter or a bike like on campus and you're wearing a skirt because you're trying to look nice and professional, but she's like, don't wear a skirt. Like it'll send the wrong message. You something like, taken seriously. You want to be taken seriously. And the way you describe it, obviously you're kind of shocked and dismayed at this kind of like outreach. And yet, like, of course, you also take it in. You also, of course, kind of internalize it. Yeah. And so, did you keep kind of a running diary in your head, I guess, of your experience? How did you reach back and kind of like recover all of these repressed memories?
The book was really put together through my Gmail inbox, which is crazy because I was very diaristic to friends, and I would write. I mean, Chloe Hurley, my friend, is here today. I wrote her lots of emails about working at Google, and also my brother. I had a running GChat throughout the day. He was working at a big technology company, had been in India. And I was skeptical of it. I went through this training that was called Radical Accountability Training, which is so perverse when you actually look back to what was being said to young people, which is basically like, if you come into a meeting and you're 5 minutes late, you don't want to say, I was late because of traffic. You want to say, I should have left earlier given traffic. It's like this completely distorted, like must be the most high agency person sort of, of all
It's
times.
really Soviet, actually. It's sort of like in the Gulag when they when they told you, you had to confess your sins. Like I thought of like whatever.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't a good citizen. I wasn't a good comrade. I had these internal thoughts.
Yeah. It was like, must, in Russia, car drives you. It was crazy. It was really, it felt very weird. And it felt like a high control environment. And even though I was giving the campus tours and talking about what, promised land it was. And some of the journalists would be kind of skeptical about the whole, allure of it. And, so I was able to kind of hold the two thoughts that this is a little bit creepy, but also it's, generally is a company with a good heart, whatever. But, I think that it surprised me to look back and kind of trace this arc, because I was not one of these young people that was funneled into living in Mountain View and one of these developments where your whole life is in the company town. And a lot of the people that I started working with, people married other people in that cohort. Mm-hmm. It was like the continuation of school. It was like a grad program where it was kind of incestuous and everyone was obsessed with each other. And I was like, I'm going to have my own life, and my family lives nearby and all this. And I think that I did sort of hang back. And then almost exactly a year into me working at Google, my brother died. Mm-hmm. And it was like complete shock. It was like sort of the book is like a very intensely personal story alongside the sort of my kind of corporate, journey. And in an instant, my relationship to Google completely changed in ways that kind of set me back from I probably would have left, other than that. I was like, I needed the solidity and stability of Google. And now being kind of, person with a badge who's coming into the building, it offered me something it couldn't have before, because I kind of did have, my own life outside of it. And the fact that, it wasn't a place where people were wanting to talk about that. And, it wasn't a place that, I wasn't bringing my whole self to work. Let's put it that way.
And it was a relief in a way.
It was a relief to be sort of just like the anonymous, girl by the side of the stage, handing the script to, Larry and Sergey, who probably didn't even know my name, or whatever. But and, I think, as time went on, once I kind of got my footing back, I kind of did sort of build back, more criticism of the rhetoric, because then the sort of Larry Page era started, which was another interesting thing to kind of go back and look at in the book, because he kind of imported this techno-optimism thing that is very familiar to the kind of AI debate today. But it was so comical, because he would be talking about, like, he had this catchphrase: learning, living, and loving. We need computers.
Not that.
Live, laugh, love. It's like we need computers to do all the annoying tasks in life. Meanwhile, it's like Google's just like secretly just hoovering up all the kind of like data and inner life of the people, whatever. But it seems so ridiculous and hokey, and we would kind of joke about it, and I ended up sort of moving through different roles, and each role just sort of seemed to sort of map to this kind of like the evolution of the company, but also the complexity of Google in the world. Like, I just sort of like always found myself at a job where I was like right in the crosshairs of the most annoying aspects of Google trying to tell a story about itself. And then just like kind of figuring out what my own kind of story and beliefs and thoughts, were as I was going through Saturn's return or whatever I was doing in my 20s.
Yeah, so your own story, because obviously you were the bard of Google, right? Your voice was kind of like, you were a voice for hire for this corporation. You were a bit quirky. But you were also, delivering the message as you needed to. And underneath that, your own voice was kind of simmering, as you describe. When did you have the sense, I want to write about this? I mean, obviously, as you say, you were in communication with friends, bitching, talking shit over Gmail, whatever. But like, when did you have the idea, okay, I want to write a memoir about this time in my life, and kind of like, kind of unveil that voice that was simmering underneath all those years? No, I started writing a novel, and when I moved to New York, and I
went to work at a place called Google Creative Lab, which randomly is like catching the most strays in my book.
Right, that was like, it's described as kind of like the worst, I think.
I mean, when I have bad bosses on the cover, it's like that, and it's kind of enshrouded in mystery, and is the place that really carefully manages its image. I like could not resist the revenge of this, I guess, because I had such a horrible time there. But it was, they were pumping out the kind of Google story at large. They did the Super Bowl ads, and they were branding Google Glass, and really like loving.
That went well. Yeah.
Crushed it.
Yeah.
Crushed it with that. And so when I went there, and it's like it was a really kind of mundane bad management story. I just sort of wasn't really well managed. I wasn't really well hired or transitioned onto this team. It was just sort of like a difficult experience. So I was just there a year, but I started writing a novel, which I was just kind of doing like the morning pages and following my bliss, whatever. And it ended up being this like really angry sort of like feminist manifesto of the assistant to Larry Page, sort of like simmering with rage. It's sort of because I saw a lot of women around the execs, and I wasn't questioning it much before, but they were so amazing in their EQ, and they're always constantly anticipating what these guys need and want, and they know them better than they know themselves, and they can manage the moods and the personalities. And yet, meanwhile, the guy doesn't even like know this person's name or like anything about them. So, like, just on an emotional, psychological level, just insanely unequal how these women sort of devote their lives to being, and they're incredible. They're incredibly skilled at what they do. And they're the women behind these men. And anyway, so I started writing this book, and it was just sort of like having no idea what I'm doing, which is similar to how I wrote the memoir, where I started writing the memoir by like Googling how do you write a memoir, or like how do you structure a memoir. So I've been.
Wait, really?
To be precise, I watched a webinar about it.
Okay, and did you follow it? Because I'm a great believer actually in like.
Yeah, it was great.
There's
a whole formula. I mean, it's 3 acts and. Yeah. You get the Post-its out. You put the yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I kind of was doing that with the novel, but it was a little bit like I wasn't quite self-actualized enough at that time to be like, where's this like rage coming from? Because I think I was sort of existing in the company, being like, wow, this is still such a great company, and it's like equal opportunity and all these other things. Where meanwhile I'm like simmering with rage on the side, writing this feminist novel. But yeah, that never really saw the light of day. But.
Did you finish it? Did you ever finish it?
No. I mean, but elements of it, I think, kind of surfaced in the walkout, because I think it was sort of like, oh, here's me actually I was articulating kind of what it observed, because the initial concept for the walkout was a day without women. Like, what happens in the company without women, who are kind of so mistreated through all the sort of mismanagement that was going on at that time with these inappropriate relationships, and then the women sort of being pushed out. One of the women at the center of the walkout controversy had a baby with the chief legal counsel of Google, who'd been around forever, and he actually oversaw the HR department. So it's just sort of like, what recourse is there for that woman? And it was like he didn't pay child support. It was an awful story. One of these like amazing assistants, it's just as like got caught. The whole thing was just ugly. So that was one way where I think like the voice was sort of coming out, and then this actual book, I think, was born of just sort of like my curiosity to understand where it had all gone so awry, and knowing that I'd started at one point, ended up at this completely different point. And it was sort of like a classic arc, right? Like, having watched the webinar, I knew that was a classic memoir.
Yeah, the webinar taught you that it's classic arc in 3 acts. Yeah. When you approached the task of writing this memoir, were you scared at all? Or not scared, I don't mean like they're going to sue your pants off, not necessarily, but just like, you're as a people pleaser, as a person who wants to get along with a high EQ, as you said, and so on. Was it kind of like, oh, these people are going to be mad at, you know what I mean? Like, because you never really, in the book, as you described it, it's not like you tear off your badge and scream, fuck you, like, I hate you, and march. I mean, in a sense, you did the walkout, but like, afterwards you continue to, you make your displeasure known, but it's not like you kind of like, you're like, I'm gonna pull the rug from under you, so were you like, okay, I'm taking the step here where I'm like, I'm calling everyone by their name, my boss, my direct boss, all of these people. what if am I a bad girl? You know, like that sort of thing.
Yeah,
I'm just
naughty.
kind of ventriloquizing what I surely would have felt. I was
mean,
like, they're going to be mad at me. Like, no matter that they're like awful, but you know.
For all my like general desire to get along in the world, I barely thought about that. I have a small amount of guilt about the group of people, which is probably like in the range of 6 to 10, who are catching strays in the book. Like, it's sort of like someone who just has no idea that they're a bit of a baddie. I think,
right.
You know, someone who's sort of like someone who's like a good corporate operative, I guess. You know, people who made comments to me, or like, also my friend Liz Weber. So like we talked a lot about work in those years, and I had so many times I was like literally quoting people. So it made it great to just put things back together. Is be like, oh yeah, this person said this thing in a meeting, and this is how I felt. I could easily put myself back in. You know, I think I just sort of like got so exhausted by the end of writing it that the idea of like changing people's names or scrambling details, I just sort of didn't get around to it. I definitely considered it, and I like prepared to get some angry emails. But also, Emma Straub of Books Are Magic told me that you know, when it's a book, people can really ignore it. You know, it's like I think like when
as opposed to what?
So when I went, like, it was excerpted in the New Yorker, and the going through the fact checking process was quite literally the craziest thing I've ever experienced.
Okay, so talk about that a little bit. I mean, we talked about it, but talk about it. It
all began with the first thing the fact checker said to me was that, as I had said, like one of the first things in this piece was that I was standing by the stage watching TGIF. Larry Page had a bit of a tummy protruding through his, Lululemon t-shirt, whatever. So she was Getty imaging Larry Page in that year, being like, looks taut to me. I was like, this, because my book is like so, it's like, it's fast, it's loose, we're like all over the place, with
it's vibes, not facts.
It's vibes. So, and like, also I sort of like, since Google kind of self-diagnosed as ADHD. And so it's like my own account of writing this book is like, I know that I had like a receipt for this particular claim, or, all these like articles and things that I read. And it's just like I wasn't at home. I mean, the whole thing was just like, this memoir was not meant to be fact-checked. We did get there, to Larry Page. His stomach was portrayed as taut.
So it was changed to taut?
I think we just lost the line. But another example was that we spent like probably 30 minutes on the phone going through reviewing videos to support the claim that I was making that someone had dimples, landing on the fact that the person only had one confirmable dimple, which changed the language. So,
yeah, I mean, the New Yorker. I mean, nobody does it like them, I guess. Yeah.
I don't know where we began with that, but
the fear.
So she would, and the fact checker said to me that ultimately there'll be so many eyes on this, so it's important that it's kind of like all bulletproof and all those other things. But I think it's like it's hard to find information in books. There's Google Books is not searchable and all this. So I'm confident that the people who need to ignore the book can ignore the book. And,
right.
Meanwhile, there's plenty of people that still work for the people there who seem to feel, very gratified by the, portrayal and what have you.
Have you been hearing, getting missives from fellow former coworkers?
I think that people who are there, because there was a time that, the walkout in my career came out of a time where Google was so interested in this concept of psychological safety, whether or not that was true. There was this sense that, the employees can speak up and people can challenge authority, and we don't want Google even said itself a lot that you can't give managers too much power because people get corrupt and they abuse their power, and it's like you have to constrain it, find ways to constrain it. Google's no longer
smash cut to
smash cut to all these people, but who have tremendous power and abuse it. But Marion, the boss of the book, has become a really powerful person at Google, and someone said to me a while ago that. When we were on her team, she would say so many ridiculous things and have ideas that you kind of have to like chase down or, push back on or whatever. But now she's got so much power that no one can say anything. Really, she has these ideas, she has these, whims, and people have to go and chase the thread sort of, dutifully and all this. And, so I think that, there's just a much broader sense of discontent for these specific people, but also I feel very purely that I've characterized these departments fairly, because they're just, as things go in organizations that are very complicated, there's just pockets of like crazy toxicity and crazy dysfunction, and because Google has unlimited budgets, and it's like there's not enough sort of constraints. There's just the whole thing is just like bullshit jobs get run amok and politics run amok. And so I'm satisfied. I think that the people who need to read this and feel seen, will and have, and
Yeah, no, I have no doubt. I was just wondering about your own kind of like complicated psychological mechanisms.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not such a great compartmentalizer, but in this case, I'm just sort of like, yeah, they had it coming.
No, I mean, and you're right, and you're right. What was for you the kind of most fun part of this book to write, and what was the hardest? What do you say?
Well, the hardest was definitely writing about my brother's death, and when I went through the first draft, the book was immediately so psychological. Like I think it's even probably brought it back a bit, but it was really like I'm going so deep in my psyche as a little girl in Catholic school. I mean, it's still that's still in there, but the feedback that I got, I saw a review today that was like, we didn't need to know about the particulars of her Catholic school uniform. I'm like, no, you did. But I think that some of the feedback I got from Hannah, my wonderful editor, was with the scene where my brother dies, that it was sort of tonally very cold when in the first draft. That it was sort of like I was just sort of like reporting the facts, and that was just me sort of trying to get through it. So last summer when I was editing it, I was visiting my parents on the UCSB campus. And it was actually the very week that he died. And I was like, I'm being called in. I'm being called in here to really go where that moment took me. And I don't think I'd ever quite kind of processed that, that loss, and also thinking through it through the lens of like how that changed the trajectory of my life. It was like quite deep,
Mm-hmm.
and it was I think it was like sort of work that I needed to do in general in my life. But when I got through it, I was just like ready to kind of like sweat and, take a walk, but it was that was really intense. I think that some of the most fun stuff to write about was, the delicious revenge of writing about Creative Lab, which I think was this amazing mix of like the most kind of grandiose tech speak, BS marketing, it's and they kind of get away with it. There's just people are just sort of like, let them do it, and so having my kind of just like bit of a scourge sort of attitude and the takedown of that was just like absolutely delicious. And I look forward to the blowback there as well.
Is it, it's you say at some point, it might be actually in the acknowledgments when you say something like gossip is like
power building,
power,
Sorry to the bosses in the audience.
A sort of a consciousness building mechanism or something like that. Was that the case to when you were still at Google?
Absolutely.
And did that kind of power take you through writing this memoir? Because we certainly gossip a lot.
We certainly do.
Yeah.
Certainly do.
We have a group chat.
Yeah, we do.
It's
a lifeblood.
It's called Moms Being Bitches. One more member of this group chat is right here with us in the audience.
Everybody on that deserves it. So, no, just kidding. We're nice. We have good hearts.
No, we do. Yeah.
I think that. So there was a.
They have it coming.
They absolutely.
Whoever.
It's mostly influencers, and put your life out in public. I guess I could say the same for myself now, but don't be mean to me. Just kidding. I think that actually I had quite a bit of my evolution and consciousness was formed in what we used to call break room, which was I see some members of break room here tonight. Is when things started to get really kind of toxic and dysfunctional at YouTube, and it was sort of both on the like team level and the impact of the technology level. And again, you're just being kind of fed the talking points and the corporate line, which is so inherently unsatisfying. And I think that, people at Google are so smart and so interesting. And, it was really, I loved sitting around. And some of this came out of the walkout too, because there was a group of ethical Googlers who were talking, kind of analyzing the impact of the technology, which was a more sort of like intellectual gossip, I guess. But I think that I really gained a lot from sort of people's analysis of what was going on in their day to day and how this sort of connected to the overall system. As someone who was not coming from an especially kind of skeptical or critical point of view, is really instructive. And also, like, you make great friends talking shit. It's sort of one of the truths of life. And I think that at Google too, because I think when you have problems in your team or your role or your management, it's really isolating. And I think it's just sort of like inherently nice to, you feel less crazy. There's a lot of gaslighting in the book as well. I mean, as I kind of go through the end of my time, that was another thing, really interesting, weird thing to reconstruct, because I had a lot of conversations recorded from when I went in with, these kind of retaliation conversations, and they were, everyone cares about you, Claire, and we just want you to be well. This is sort of what they're saying to me. It's like you go into these conversations and there's this imbalance of power. It's like this HR person or it's a VP or someone, and you're like, okay, I'm trying to hear in good faith what you're saying, but I'm also trying to hold on to my point of view and my sense that this is like, massively, flagrantly, messed up. And many of the people that have reached out to me since I've been kind of public about these issues is people who are like desperately alone in this, and there's literally no recourse. There's no way to go to HR, it seems, to people, which is so sad. There's these systems that really don't seem to work for people at all, to navigate, a really difficult situation with, a manager or, sort of whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's quite like buoying and bolstering in ways that are like so crucial, and the company probably would discourage to this day.
You have a Substack, as Alexa said, and it's called Tech Support, and it's great. I receive it even though I'm not a tech worker, but I really enjoy reading it because you're kind of like an agony aunt, right? For disgruntled tech workers or tech workers who are standing at some sort of crossroads or don't know what to do in certain situations that come up in whatever corporate job they're holding. And you're really good at it, I think. And so I guess my question is twofold. One is, what would you have told yourself as in if you had this sort of like advice giver when you were in the thick of it at the corporation? And also, this is a big one. I don't know if you have an answer or if you even should have an answer. Like, what would your kind of big picture advice be to someone who is struggling? Obviously, there are many specific situations, but someone who is right now at like a tech corporation, like Google or something like it, and is struggling. Like, is another life possible? Like, I don't know. What would you?
No, don't bother. No.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, I definitely learned that, it's speaking up and, pushing back is sort of like, it doesn't really usually create linear change or like positive change for your, career. I think that, the advice that I needed and would give is that, however you can do it, tuning into a sense of, what you care about, your sort of, I went through many, iterations of this with career coaches and whatever, that was kind of all mediated through this sort of like corporate, hierarchy and how to navigate it, which wouldn't be how I would do it. But, what are your values? In what way can you strengthen your own point of view and compass such that you're not as susceptible and vulnerable to, the kind of onslaught of that? And Google, I think, is a unique situation where the frame is so intense and so overwhelming. And it seems even if you're not in a, pink collar job, like I was being in comms and marketing, I think that the company requires emotional investment in a way that makes it really hard when things go sour, because you have this loss of identity and all these other things. And so I've known a lot of people who have remained in tech who I think have a stronger sense of self and an identity that, exists. It's stateless. It exists beyond, one company, where I think it would have been hard for me to leave Google because of all the different myriad ways it was sort of wrapped up in me. And I think it was a lot of my sort of journey was to get kind of strong enough and sort of like stand on my own 2 feet enough, right? To be able to kind of like blow my career up and be like, I will survive. And I know that there's, a better life out there. But, and also just that, like, but at the same time, and I think it's surprising advice. Like, I find work to be a really important part of life. I think it's like,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think because when I first left Google, I think I got a lot of kind of people in the sort of anti-work thing, because people became very, very disillusioned with places like Google very quickly, particularly people who were in this very large, very exploited contractor class. And there seems so many people who are in these sort of cottage industries around Google who are kind of second-class citizens and all this. And I think people are just like, a better world is not possible. Capitalism is like, we're all it's just everything is like so exploitative, and those things are true. But at the same time, you have to find your foothold, whether it's figuring out how to sort of emotionally compartmentalize from some of these kind of more psychological aspects of the job. Or else finding ways to kind of, I think also like as a kind of junior manager, as I was coming up, there's lots of ways that you can sort of like stand up for other people. And I think that's tremendously gratifying and meaningful work as well. So I think you can't exactly throw the baby out with the bathwater, because ultimately at the end of the day, like these companies are like the biggest employer there is, like so many people just cycling in and out at any, given point, that I'm no purist by any means that like, I'll look down my nose at you if you're like working at a place like Google, because that's easily criticism that could be levied at me after, staying there for 12 years. But, there are questions that I think you have to sort of continually ask yourself about how you kind of, to put it cornily, want to show up in the world and show up for other people. Ultimately there has to be some delta between your personality and identity and the company line.
Here. I think it's time for some questions. I think we have like 10 minutes, maybe. Anyone? A man in the striped shirt, and after that, woman in the striped shirt.
Can we bring this over?
Yeah. Oh, should we? Or maybe you can just speak up.
Yeah. Sure. We gotcha. We can repeat.
So I'm curious about the role of HR and how it's shifted in corporate America, because I happen to work in a building that Google bought, and my company ended up getting kicked out when our lease was up.
Right.
But I was just curious with the way that HR was working, where it's come from protecting the rights of workers to actually protecting the corporation, and when you think that shift may have started happening, and whether you think it was something that started around the time that Google came into its world domination.
There is an interesting book that the guy who was the head of HR at Google, Laszlo Bock, for a long time, he wrote a book called Work Rules. It was all about like Google's approach to HR, and it was sort of a time capsule, because I think that at that point Google could afford to rethink HR, and it was sort of supported its philosophy that if you want people to like give the best, to give the most, to kind of help us kind of take over the world. I guess I wouldn't say that exactly, but then you need people to be happy, and you need them to feel invested in the company, and that they, and Larry Page said it a lot, like Google needs to feel like a family, and all these things that now again sound kind of creepy and cringe, but at the time it advanced a business goal that was also kind of a utopian ideal. As the company got bigger, I think that the cost of that became too high. The transparency, the ability for employees to speak up and speak out. So that must have been happening and underway, because later it was sort of revealed that they'd kind of been working on anti-union messaging, a sort of psychological operation, long before the walkout. But I think with the walkout, they realized that they would rather have kind of more power, and less questioning of that authority. And then they've dug into that, because I think that the thing that's happened since is that layoffs are kind of always looming in tech, and the fact that employees are sort of, they don't care about employees as much anymore, because they're like, your job could easily go to AI. White collar workers are like stupider than AI or something. It's like the whiplash for me, having heard that humans are everything. People are the lifeblood of this company. So I think that there was probably some insincere aspects of how HR and these other things were handled from the company, at the company level back in the day. But I think the world has changed a lot, and they'd rather just kind of hold the power and not share it. And God bless.
The woman with the striped shirt.
Thanks for sharing. Fascinating. Can't wait to read the book. I'm a Googler.
Oh.
Also marketing.
Oh my God! You got to tell me, what are they saying? What's the tea?
I'm also part of the Alphabet Workers Union.
Oh, cool. Yeah, sure.
Yes. I think the union was created probably after that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I'm curious your thoughts on, do you think unions still can make a change when facing a giant company like Google right now? Or I guess another question would be, if you're part of union in Google, what would you want to do?
Yeah, I think that's really hard. I think what's really hard about it was that, again, the walkout came out of a time where the company was still sort of saying that, you're not going to lose your job. Like they were kind of trying to protect not protesting by any means, but I certainly didn't think I would lose my job for organizing, which was naive to say the least. But now, because I think that they fired people for for various things, there's been a lot of chilling effects, as they say. So I think that what's really cool about the union is that people are willing to sign their name on the line for it, because I think it takes a lot of courage and it's a lot of risk to say that I want to I'm putting it out there that that I want to fight for better working conditions or whatever here. I think that one of the bigger challenges for the union is that there's so much that you could organize around, and I think it's hard to get consensus of people. It's like a lot of the organizing after the walkout focused on contractors and TVCs, which is a really worthy cause and a huge amount of people, but it's complicated legally. The protected status of those people is not the same as Googlers, and I could see a lot of complexity with it. I don't know. I think that some of the most interesting organizing I saw after the walkout was small groups of people organizing around specific causes. I mean, it's kind of the Maven and Dragonfly, these sort of specific technologies that people didn't want their code to be deployed in certain ways, for military action, that sort of thing. But I think that it was really effective to capitalize on things that were happening that people could easily galvanize around. You could get relatively big numbers, but the question is, how do you build a sort of durable, ongoing organization? And I gotta say, I have no idea, because it seems really hard. But thank you for doing that, because I think it's really cool.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Hi, Claire.
Hi, Patricia.
So you've sort of answered this, but I'm just curious. I've heard the Atlantic podcast and the article in the New Yorker, and now there's the New York Times podcast. Is there no pushback at all? I mean, are they just sort of ignoring you because that's probably the better way to do it? And I mean, from the people on high who are still there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of Google's PR way. I think is to kind of try to ignore and hope it goes away. Yeah, I think a lot of people have asked me a version of this, because Careless People, which came out a year ago and was about Facebook, and she was sort of gagged from ever speaking about it, and Facebook's really gone after her in a way. So I wondered if Google had seen that and thought, it's sort of like the Streisand effect, where, them fighting this is going to draw so much more attention to it. But I think ultimately, I wrote a very different book. And while there is lots of calling out and calling in of Google in the book, I think that it's unabashedly a memoir and my personal experience. And it's so the only time I've heard anything about Google's response is the New Yorker fact checker going to them with the entire thing, because the excerpt in the New Yorker was all of the kind of Google beats of the book, so anything that would be relevant to Google. And then they basically didn't say anything. So I don't know.
Was it just no comment, or
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's they've probably sat with it and decided that's what they're just going to hope it kind of goes away, and eventually it will.
One last question,
Dan Riley.
I have a craft question. Can you describe the experience of reading all of your old G chats
Cringe, full body cringe constantly.
that have nothing to do with Google, living with your 20-something-year-old self?
That's a good question.
Oh, it was
the most
fun.
horrifying things you came across.
Well, it was a lot about Lisa Weber's dating life. I'm actually a very much a intense question asker in GChat. So it's I would filter through my own struggles and stuff, but I think I was I was so intensely curious about my friends' lives at all times. But yeah, it was I was so grateful for it going back, because if you try to pick any year of your life and you try to imagine going back there, it's people are constantly saying this to me now. I can't imagine writing a memoir. I don't have the memory for it. There's years of my life I don't remember. And that's exactly how I felt when starting, because there were certain things where I'm thinking, okay, coming to Google, I can kind of remember, my parents took a picture of me on the first day, these sorts of things that you can kind of paste it back together. But then there's years that just sort of go by, in the narrative. And, thank God for all these G chats, because it really put me back into the kind of priorities and concerns of myself at 23 and what my friends were talking about. And also just my Gmail inbox is remarkably intact. It's like there's the ticket stubs, there's the things started to get more digital over time, and then you're Venmoing people and you're all this stuff. And it's like I have my Gmail inbox is like at 99% full at all times. I'm like constantly like bumping up the storage and never delete anything, like complete hoarder, digital hoarder. And now in the past, however many years, and so many photos and texts, so it was cringe, but it was also, I feel that I started the book, I think, with less compassion for my young self, because, and I think this criticism is possibly levied against me now, which is like, how could you have been so naive and idiotic to be drawn into this like obviously evil corporation? Like I was always smarter than that. Like that's, people have been more savvy than Claire Stapleton was at 23. But, it's sort of like you kind of understand where you're coming from. It's like I had to learn to be more kind of sympathetic to my own kind of perspective and my like, delightful girlishness.
And it was a huge coup, It was like, wow, you get to work at Google. I mean, I remember like hearing of people who went to work at Google in like 2000 whatever and being like, you're so lucky or whatever, I mean,
you won American Idol, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Are we out of time? Oh, okay, one more. Anyone?
No, we're not.
I have a question.
Oh,
Hi, Isabel.
What made you feel finally ripened to tell the story?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because I wrote an essay about Google, kind of just because the desperation to have the last word. So sort of like started even writing it probably before I left. And I thought about writing a book then, and an agent told me, now is the time to sell this book. And if you don't, you're gonna come crawling to me in 5 years wanting to sell this book, and it's gonna be too late. And I'll never forget saying, And it was literally exactly what happened, except for crawling back to this particular person who was like, I remember what you said. It's sort of like always a good time, I think, to write about tech, because like sort of like public, it's just as bad as like the public image of the industry is. It's always getting worse in different different ways. But yeah, I think that, I had to come a bit of a ways, I think, distance from it. I think also like the experience of motherhood was very interesting for me, because it just like, it brought up a lot of, I don't think it's talked about enough, that like the way you show up in your kind of intimate relationships, or like for me, it was, I think, particularly trying to be an authority figure for my kids was very hard for me. And it reminded me of things that I really struggled with, working at Google. And so it was sort of that like, light navel gazing while you're trying to kind of desperately evolve. And then, just like kind of knowing that I had the material, having watched the webinar, I was like, now's the time. But for the record, it took like 3 years. So.
You need to send everyone the link to the webinar.
It's like the woman is like,
or you can do a testimonial. You can do a testimonial. You can be an influencer for the webinar.
Yeah.
Look, you did it.
Exactly. I really should.
Yeah, Claire, you did it. Yeah. Congratulations. Yay.
Webinar graduate.
Please keep it going for Claire and Naomi. This was such a wonderful event.
My friend.
You did it.
All right, so Claire will be signing at the end of this event, which is what we've now reached. So if you look to the back of the room where my delightful coworkers are dancing, this is where Claire will be over there. If you don't mind taking your personal belongings with you, that would be great, because we have to turn this place back into a bookstore. So we gotta pack up all these chairs and do some magic. And then if you're still with us on the YouTube live stream, you could buy many copies of this book. If you're with us in person, you can buy them here. Thank you so much and have a wonderful night.